All right, good morning and welcome to another edition of SFOF Fiscal Focus. We're excited that you're all here today. I'm Derek Kreifels, the president of SFOF, and today we're getting to highlight the Missouri State Treasurer, Scott Fitzpatrick. We're excited to have him here. I'm going to make a few announcements before we get started. Just as a reminder, if you have not if you are a corporate partner and you have not reserved your room for the national meeting this summer, please do so, even if you aren't sure that you're coming yet. Read the cancellation policy. We fully anticipate the room block because we have a block with ALEC and with their participants who are anticipating 600 to 800 attendees. We fully anticipate that room block filling up probably by the 1st of June, even though our deadline for the room block isn't until June 18th. If you are a board member or a state leader, state staffer, of course, you do not book your room on your own. You'll email Melanie, Melanie at sfof.com, and she'll take care of your room. But again, corporate partners, if you even think that you might be able to come, I would encourage you to get that room reserved. Of course, many of you know with your sponsorships, you received so many complimentary registrations for the meeting. If you have any questions about that, we're happy to walk you through that process if you're new to SFOF. Also, just a reminder that we have already 34 state leaders and senior staffers registered for the event. So at least on the state government side, I think most of our offices are saying, get me the heck out of Dodge, get me somewhere fun, let's get together and be in person. So understand that many of the corporations have executives making decisions that sometimes aren't, allowing you to travel, and we understand that. And so we are working on a way for us to be able to present our panel discussions portion of that conference virtually so that you can participate or at least listen and watch. So stay tuned for more information. If you're not receiving our e-blasts, please reach out to me and let me know. We've had some spam issues with some of especially if you're a financial company. All that good cybersecurity sometimes acts a little too good and prevents some of our emails from getting through to you. So we are sending weekly updates now on the national meeting, usually on Thursdays, just to give you an update of speakers and the list of confirmed state officials coming. So just want to make sure and point your attention to that. Also, if you are a state treasurer or auditor's office that has not had a fiscal focus yet, please get in contact with me as soon as possible. We are scheduling those out right now through the end of June, and we've got about 5 Tuesdays left that haven't been reserved. So just again, have your staff or your scheduler reach out to me and I'd be happy to work with them to get something scheduled. So I'm going to go ahead and turn our attention to the reason why we're here, which is our treasurer from the Show Me State, which I still want to hear a great definition of what that really means. But I love it. And I loved it so much that I married a woman from the Show Me State. And so we're excited to have Missouri Treasurer Scott Fitzpatrick here with us today. I'm going to read his short bio real quick, just so you have an understanding of a little bit about his background. Scott Fitzpatrick was sworn in as Missouri's 47th treasurer on January 14th of 2019. As treasurer, Scott is fighting to promote government transparency and efficiency. His record as chairman of the House Budget Committee reflects his commitment to fiscal conservative values, as well as his support for small businesses and Missouri families. Scott was first elected state representative in 2012, ready for this, at the age of 25, to represent Berry and portions of Stone and Lawrence counties in Missouri. He served as chairman of the House Budget Committee in 2017 and 2018. Under Scott's conservative leadership, the state's budget surplus nearly tripled to almost $500 million, while Missouri schools were fully funded for the first time in nearly a decade. Scott understands the needs of Missouri's business owners. When he was 17 years old, Scott started his own company, Maricorp US, a Shell-Knob-based marine manufacturing and construction company that does business now coast to coast. His experience growing his company inspired him to run for office to fight unnecessary red tape and burdensome regulations. He's a member of the Cassville, Shell Knob, and Monette Chambers of Commerce and has been recognized in Springfield Business Journal's 40 Under 40. He's a lifelong Missourian. Scott graduated from Cassville High School and the University of Missouri, currently lives in Cassville, where he and his wife Mallory have two sons, Luke and Carson, and are members of the United Methodist Church in Cassville. I also want to say he also happens to be our treasurer spotlight for this month in Smart Women, Smart Money magazine. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Missouri Treasurer Scott Fitzpatrick. And Treasurer, you'll want to take yourself off of mute.
Wow, okay. Well, I'm off mute now. Okay, sorry.
There you go.
That's never going to be, it's always going to be a Zoom thing. Well, thanks for the intro. And I need to update that. I'm going to have to update that bio here in probably the next couple of weeks. My wife, Mallory, and I have our third son. Due date's the 28th. So we'll see if we make it to that day or not. But when I add the third kid, I'll probably have to cut some parts out of the middle. That seemed a little longer than I remembered it being. But anyway, so it's good to have an opportunity to do this, especially since we're not going to be getting together in person in April like we have in some of the more recent years. Looking forward to hopefully being able to be with you guys in Salt Lake. And is that, I guess, at the end of July, right?
July 27th through the 30th. Yep.
Yeah. So I like getting out to Utah. So we'll hopefully be able to be with you there. Anyway, so kind of the run of show here. You want me to just kind of give kind of an overview of the office, and then
we can tell us a little bit about the purview of the office and its responsibilities, and anything that's kind of unique to the Missouri Treasurer's Office.
Will do. Okay, so Treasurer's Office, we are about a 50-person outfit organization in Missouri state government. We're outside of the lieutenant office. We're the smallest, essentially the smallest department in terms of number of people in state government. And the constitutionally assigned duties of the treasurer is essentially I'm the custodian of all state funds. So we manage the state's cash portfolio. We manage all the banking services for the state. We essentially pay all the bills for the state. They, payments initiated in departments, but run through our office for final approval and disbursement. Like I said, we invest all the state's money. One unique thing, at least what I believe is pretty unique to the state of Missouri, is that our Constitution is the document that limits how we're allowed to invest in the state of Missouri. So we have a very restrictive investment policy, as well as a pretty restrictive collateralization requirements. Our deposits or our investments are required to be fully collateralized. And we don't have really any flexibility on that because it's in the Constitution. We're also limited in terms of we can't invest in like money market mutual funds. We are not allowed to invest in municipal bonds. So we have a very restrictive Constitution in terms of what we're allowed to invest in. It's created, particularly in this interest rate environment, a challenging job for us, seeking out opportunities that will pay us a positive rate of return, given our unique collateral requirements and kind of limitations. So just as an aside to that, we are working right now with the legislature that would expand our allowable investments to include municipal bonds, but also it would be a constitutional amendment. So it'd have to be approved by the voters in 2022. That HJR, the joint resolution, has passed the House and is in the Senate waiting a hearing. And we're hopeful we'll get that thing passed and get that on the ballot. But what we also did is we included in that of given the legislature the ability to assign other acceptable methods of investment. That way, if we are in a situation where we think there's a prudent change that could be made to investment policy that we can't do ourselves, we could go to the legislature instead of having to wait 2 years to get a vote of the people to do that. And so we're hopeful we'll have some success on that. Within our investments department, we have a link deposit program in our state, something that other states have as well. that is capped at about it's a $800 million statutory cap. And essentially, for those of you who aren't familiar with the linked deposit program, it allows us to essentially place deposits at a reduced rate of interest in financial institutions in the state, provided that that financial institution is turning around and loaning that money to a specific borrower at a reduced rate of interest on the borrower side. It's essentially, designed to, in times where, interest rates are higher and deposits aren't quite as plentiful as they are right now. It can be a really valuable program. It's a good source of capital, or a good source of liquidity for financial institutions. And it's also a good way for businesses and farms in Missouri to access lower cost capital to help fund expansion projects or working capital needs. So that program was, when I took office, was experiencing pretty rapid growth since, as a result of the kind of monetary policy employed by the Fed, reducing interest rates to essentially zero, and the extremely vast amounts of liquidity out there right now as a result of policy from the federal government in terms of stimulus bills that have been passed. It's injected a ton of money into the economy. And so it's not quite as relevant right now, given kind of the fiscal environment we're in. Outside of the investments department, we also do unclaimed property for the state. So I think a lot of treasurers have unclaimed property. We're no exception to that. It's the largest division in our office. We have, I think, 17 or 18 people in our unclaimed property division. In our unclaimed property, we do obviously financial assets that are turned over to us. We also have safe deposit boxes. Our program right now is about $1 billion in terms of how much unclaimed property we're holding. We get about $100 million of revenue to that fund every year. So $100 million roughly of new unclaimed property turned over in Missouri. And we get about 1,000 safe deposit boxes turned over to us from financial institutions that have been abandoned on an annual basis, that we inventory and store the contents of in an attempt to get that returned. We do typically hold an auction of the physical possessions after about 5 years. So we generally have an annual auction that we'll hold somewhere in Missouri to basically thin out the inventory of safe deposit box contents, to make sure we have space. We do have physical space constraints, so make sure we have room to store the new incoming property. We're required by law to eventually sell that property if we're not able to locate the owner, and then hold the proceeds of that sale for the benefit of the account owner, should they choose to or ever come forward to claim it. Beyond the unclaimed property division, well, one thing I do want to talk about our unclaimed property, and it makes me think of our staff. And I do have two of our staff people, I believe, are on the line today. My deputy treasurer Mike Price is with us. Mike came over. He was one of a handful of people that came over with me when I was appointed treasurer back in 2019, and has stayed on with me through the election. So a little background: I was appointed to the office by Governor Mike Parson after Josh Hawley was elected to the U.S. Senate, and our treasurer Eric Schmidt was appointed to be the Attorney General after Josh Hawley vacated the AG's office. And so after that happened, the governor had to appoint a treasurer and selected me out of the House of Representatives. So Mike was the director of our House Appropriations staff. So I was the budget chairman. Mike was the director of essentially the staff that staffed the budget committee. And essentially it's a nonpartisan staff that works for all members of the House. So I worked very closely with Mike when I was the budget chairman, writing state budget, and he was an incredible asset in that role. And when I had the opportunity to serve as treasurer, asked him to come join me as my deputy to help oversee and manage the day-to-day operations of the office. And then Brandon Alexander is my chief of staff. Brandon oversees our capital staff on a day-to-day basis, and has been really an incredible asset to me. Somebody who is just an awesome person to have by your side in any role in government. Has a lot of knowledge. Spent some time at the Secretary of State's office before he came to the Treasurer's office, and did some political work prior to that, working on campaigns. So he's a guy that has a good working knowledge of both the political side of of this operation, as well as the official side. But in terms of our unclaimed property, and why it made me think of staff, is we've had a lot of success returning unclaimed property. We've broken 4 records so far in our administration in terms of returning unclaimed property. The first one was we got our first $1 million returned in our first 9 days in office, which I like to joke with former Treasurer Schmidt about. He got it in 10 days. We got it in 9. So we like to talk about that every once in a while. Second, we returned over $45 million in my first fiscal year in office. So that was a record in terms of the amount of money that we returned this past year. And we were particularly proud about this, since a good chunk of this past fiscal year was spent during the pandemic. We had a lot of people working remotely. We returned the largest number of accounts that had ever been returned. So we returned over 209,000, closed over 209,000 unclaimed property accounts, which was about 11,000 more than the prior fiscal year, and was a record in terms of that. And then most recently, last month, we became the fastest of any administration to return $100 million, and we did that in just over 2 years. And I think a reason that we were able to do that is that and for any other treasurer's office that's on the line that has unclaimed property, these might be opportunities you guys could work on in your state. We've had a couple of partnerships with other state agencies that have allowed us to basically get access to data or information on individuals who have unclaimed property, which has helped us return that unclaimed property. The most recent one we did was a partnership with our Department of Labor. We believed, because as a result of the pandemic, that there were a lot of people obviously that had filed for unemployment. And so that our Department of Labor was going to have a lot of current information about contact information, email addresses, addresses for people who had filed for unemployment. And so what we did is we partnered with our Department of Labor and essentially created an opportunity to cross-reference our unclaimed property data with their unemployment data, and generated tens of thousands of matches of people who had received unemployment, but that also had unclaimed property. And as a result of that, we were able to reach out to those people, and it's resulted in several $1 million of unclaimed property being returned to people who had filed for unemployment. Another thing we had done was with our Department of Social Services, we created an automated system that monthly compares the list of our unclaimed property our unclaimed property list to their list of people who are past due on child support. And so what we've had as a result of that, we've been able to return over $3 million in past due child support to essentially the families who that money was owed to. So if what we've done is, if there's an owing parent that has past due child support, we're generating a payment to the family who that child support is owed to. So it's been helpful to a lot of families. We've had one family, I think, received like $25,000 in past due child support from this program. Anyway, so those two things have been helpful, and have been a part of some of the records that we've been able to set in terms of the amount of money and the number of accounts that we've closed. Beyond that, we also have a division in our office that does replacement checks. Essentially, we have in Missouri, if a check goes a year without being cashed, the check is outlawed and has to be replaced. So we have a staff of people that spends a lot of time helping people that have either lost a state check or whose check is expired, and they work together to try to get them a replacement check. Beyond that, I serve on several boards and commissions, as well as running a couple of programs that I'm the chair of the board for. So first would be our 529 plan. I saw Jay Candelmo on the line from a census. They're our 529 partner. We just recently were able to work together with them to extend the program management contract on our 529 plan. When I took office, shortly after I took office, our 529 plan was, we were at a silver, but we were downgraded to a bronze by Morningstar. Part of that was because of I think a lot of states had gone through contract renewals that had lowered their fees. And so by comparison, we hadn't moved in a while. So we were happy to be able to work with a census to save money for our plan participants. We were able to work together with the census to reduce fees in a way that will provide, we estimate, about $8 million worth of savings to our plan participants over the life of the contract. And it also resulted as, and some of the other things that we're able to do, including working with the census to have a mobile app now for our 529 plan, has resulted in our plan being upgraded back to silver by Morningstar, something we're really happy about. We also run the ABLE program. It's a board essentially, but we run it in the treasurer's office, and I chair that board as well as the 529 board. And we've had a lot of success with our ABLE program. We've more than doubled the size of it. We're over 2,000 accounts now in our ABLE program, over $15 million in assets under management. And we have been working really hard lately to get businesses and local governments to offer their employees payroll deduction direct deposit options for their ABLE accounts, something that a lot of employers offer for 529 accounts, but we're now pushing to try to get that same opportunity for individuals with disabilities working through the ABLE account program. Additionally, I serve on the board of the Missouri State Employee Retirement System, which is our state employee pension plan. It's about an $8 billion pension system. And that's something that I've enjoyed quite a bit. Pension policy has been really interesting to me, and I've really enjoyed. I served on that board when I was in the House for my last year when I was the budget chairman. And so being able to transition into the treasurer's office and continue in that role of on the board of trustees of the pension plan has been something I've really enjoyed. And then I've also been on the board of the Missouri Housing Development Commission, which is the governing board that oversees the low-income housing tax credit programs for the state, as well as other housing-related programs, and have enjoyed that as well. It's been that one is it's a challenging area of policy to get a grip on. It's very complicated how housing policy works and how the money flows. But we had a lot of opportunity, I felt like, to improve the operation of our tax credit program in the state and to make it more effective and more efficient for taxpayers. And so we worked hard and were able to achieve some reforms in that low-income housing tax credit program that increased essentially the value of the tax credits on the back end. Essentially what happens is a developer sells or is awarded these tax credits and then sells them to generate cash to build housing. And the challenge was that the value that the developer was receiving in terms of the price of the credit they were receiving when they were selling was very low. And so the state was essentially getting 50 cents worth of housing for every dollar worth of tax credit that they were putting out. And so we worked on ways to improve the pricing on those credits and had I think some pretty good success at that. Serve on a couple other boards and commissions in terms of, we serve on the board that issues general obligation bond debt for the state, the board of fund commissioners, and we are also on the Arts Council Trust Fund board. And then last thing I'll talk about, when the pandemic hit, so we have a financial literacy portal that we run. I think that's a huge, I think most treasurers take seriously their responsibility in promoting financial literacy, given the savings kind of crises we have in our country. And so we've just completely revamped very recently our financial literacy portal, and also did some learning from home activities last year at the beginning of the pandemic for families to be able to, who are in a situation of having to essentially provide their education to their kids. We tried to provide some resources around financial literacy and saving money and on our financial literacy portal. And that was a result of a lot of good work by our communications director, Mary Compton. So beyond that, that's the kind of the overview of the office. And it was kind of a lot, but that's a pretty detailed, I think, overview of kind of what we do.
That's great. And that's super helpful. So Treasurer, thank you for that overview. I want to shift a little bit and ask you from a personal perspective. You have it's not unusual to have a state legislator that becomes a state treasurer. I think it is unusual when you have an entrepreneur who is as successful as you have been, who managed 40 plus full-time staff in your college dorm room. and had a multi-million-dollar business before you graduate from college. And so you obviously don't need to be doing this. I just would love to hear you talk a little bit about why you chose to serve in public service, both as a state rep and now as state treasurer.
Sure. Well, number one, I really do enjoy. I do enjoy public service. I've enjoyed working in state government and trying to do what I can to have a positive impact on the way government operates, the way it spends its money, and really frankly helping constituents that have had a hard time or are having a hard time dealing with their state government. The reason I got into politics is I don't know, it may be unique and it may not be, but when I was growing up, I did not care about politics. I was more interested in playing sports, and then wanted to figure out how to make some money, and really became more interested in business. That's why I went to school. I went to school to get a business degree. I was running a business while I was in college. Started it as a little dock repair company in high school, and then throughout college turned it into a manufacturing operation and a contractor that was essentially building manufacturing dock systems and installing them in marinas around the country. And so I was really focused on that and was enjoying my work. But it was around the recession in 2008 that it was kind of the first time I realized, I was in college, I was a sophomore in college, but it was kind of the first time I realized that politics was going to have an impact on my life, whether I wanted it to or not. And that's when I kind of started paying attention, which is probably later than some people who end up in politics, start paying attention. But what I found was that the economy was in shambles. My business was struggling. I had customers who, because of bank failures, were struggling. Their loan situation was complicated and made it to where I had some bad debt from customers. I was just essentially trying to balance, all these employees and making sure that they were able to feed their families, making sure I was able to pay vendors. And, we were struggling to get work, and what work we could get, we found that there were so many hurdles put in place by the government, whether it be federal or state or local, from a permitting standpoint, where there was unnecessarily long delays in getting answers from bureaucrats about things. Or, the other thing was, it's like every time you turn around, you're finding out about a new tax return you have to file, or a new department or agency of some government entity that you have to, provide, information to, whether it be your fuel tax or your unemployment tax or your sales tax, use tax. It's a never ending sea of bureaucracy. And it was just so frustrating. And it felt to me like the people on the other end of the phone, just did not really care about the problems that the people who paid the taxes that funded their salaries, the challenges they were dealing with. And to me, that's just what got me interested. I decided I wanted to get involved in government as a result of that. And essentially, I graduated from Mizzou in 2010, came home, was a bachelor in Shell, Missouri, running my business, and learned that my state representative was going to be leaving due to term limits. And so I felt like it was a good opportunity for me at that point in my life to run for state representative. And that's what I did. So I ran for state rep in 2012 and got elected, and then ultimately decided that I wanted to focus on the budget, because I felt like, from a legislature standpoint, power of the purse and directing how money is to be spent is I think, most important power that the legislature has, and is certainly the power that gives them the most influence over how state government is going to be operated. And so that's where I focused, and ended up becoming the budget chairman. And then the transition to treasurer was one that I did not expect, but that came about as a result of the opportunity that was created after the election in 2018.
Yeah. Well, a rhetorical question only for all those listening. What were you doing when you were 25 years old? I know I wasn't thinking about running for office and serving in the ways that the treasurer has. So that's kudos and thank you for continuing to be a public servant in Missouri. I want to open it up for some Q&A. We've got some of our great sponsors on here. I just want to mention real quick, I know we have Public Trust Advisors, ITDM, Singularis Group, Ascensus, Robbins Geller, Redmond and Dowd, and Academy Securities today represented on here. We've got several treasurers. I see representatives from Kentucky and from Idaho and Nebraska and Louisiana and Indiana. And I think that's about it. And we've got a couple of our board members have already said hello to Jimmy Kemp, but Dee Dee Bass Wilbon is one of our newest board members, and we're happy that she's here joining us today. The one thing that is a little different about SFOF, just a reminder, our board of directors is a citizen-led board who have a heart and want to encourage all of you that are serving in your capacity as either state treasurer or state auditor. So our board is not made up of state elected officials or of corporate partners, and so it's a great group. We also have Arizona and North Dakota on, so I apologize. My co-host is helping me. Whoops, the other way. She's helping me keep everything straight. So let's open it up for some Q&A. Does anyone have a question for Treasurer Fitzpatrick? Either corporate partners or state government, state folks.
Hi, I do.
Yes.
My name's Helena Burke-Bevan. I am an executive director for government banking at JP Morgan. And
Okay.
I actually cover Missouri and Kansas. And so it's the first time I've met Mike Price before, first time to meet Treasurer Fitzpatrick. And my question, well, first of all, what an impressive background. I really appreciate that as a citizen of the state, that, you know, you're really working on, especially the unclaimed property. It just is amazing. And, you know, kudos to you for that. I am curious about the possibility of including municipal bonds as an investment instrument. Will there be in the legislation, I haven't seen it, it's kind of the first time I've heard of this, is there in the legislation some restrictions, like will it only be GO bonds, you know, or do you stay away from appropriation bonds? Just curious about that.
So there are rating restrictions on the bonds. There's no restriction in terms of like the type of, you know, like being a GO bond versus an appropriation backed bond or revenue backed bond. But I'm going to pull up the legislation because it went through a little bit of a change. So I can just tell you exactly. I think it has to be in the top. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. So it's essentially we can invest in municipal securities, possessing one of the 5 highest long-term ratings or the highest short-term rating issued by a nationally recognized rating agency and maturing and becoming payable not more than 5 years from the date of purchase. So that was the background on, or yeah, what we ended up doing on on that. And so I think one other thing we did is we're currently limited that 5 years to maturity limitation exists pretty much throughout our investment policy. So I mean, we really can't do anything that matures later than 5 years. So we've also extended on our U.S. government and agency bonds. We've extended the maturity in this legislation to 7 years. Looking at the yield curve in terms of, it's just, there's a lot of government buyers of these securities in that 5 year space. And we felt like giving ourselves a little longer window would give us the ability, especially in this environment, which we don't know how long it's going to last, right?
Mm-hmm.
A little more flexibility to go out, maybe where the yield curve steepens a little bit. So that's the background on it.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, who else has a question?
I've got a question. You were talking about how you were working hand in hand with the unemployment system, and I find that fascinating. I know in Kentucky, our unemployment system has really struggled both in getting payments out as well as dealing with a lot of fraud. Has your unemployment system had similar things, and was that a challenge working with them to deliver some of these other services?
Well, for us and our relationship with them on the unclaimed property side, it didn't cause any issues. But yes, the answer is there have been some challenges. There were some overpayments made, and that's something that has been discussed in the legislature this session. And so there's a push in the legislature to basically just forgive that and not require people to repay. I think there's probably there's a good chance that they will, because the federal government has essentially said if there were overpayments made by accident, that you can forgive that. I think there's going to be less. I think they're still going to try to recoup the state portion of those overpayments. And I can also tell you that they're not going to let people from a fraud standpoint, people who obtained those payments from fraud. I think they're still planning to pursue those people. I can tell you just on my business side, we had somebody, when the $600 federal benefit was approved, in my private sector business, we had somebody leave. They quit on their own. They were not laid off. They filed for unemployment, and they got, they were immediately started receiving the benefits, even though we had appealed the claim. And ultimately, it was determined that they were not entitled to those benefits, but they'd already received about $10,000 of them. And so I think you're going to have, and so it was determined they needed to repay that. So I think you're going to have a lot of people that did take advantage of the system, that said, hey, we're just going to, $600 a week on top of the federal or on top of the state benefit. I can make about the same money not working as I can make working. And so I think there are going to be examples of that. And I think those people should be, they should have to pay it back. But there are going to be some people who that gets forgiven on. And it is certainly a topic of discussion in our legislature this year.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Auditor Harmon. Other questions?
I'll just chime in again, if that's okay.
Sure.
Are there plans for use of the next stimulus package? Have the funds for the first one been fully spent? And what are they going to do with the next tranche?
So the answer is, on the first round, they have not been fully spent, but it has been mostly spent. We did a variety of things. One thing unique to Missouri I think unique to Missouri on the first round, was 25% of the money we received from the CARES Act and the Coronavirus Relief Fund was appropriated directly to local governments. So the governor appointed me to basically lead a working group on the use of the federal money under the CARES Act. And then our office took the responsibility of dealing with all the local governments that we paid out about $580 million to of the money that we received. $520 million. And so that allowed the local governments to create basically local grant programs for small businesses, nonprofits, to help their local governments who are maybe experiencing, COVID related costs or revenue, or that they couldn't cover because of the revenue shortfalls. And so that was kind of one of the things we did. We also had a bunch of state-based grant programs that we put together, but we also, shored up the state budget in ways that were allowable under the guidance. For instance, salaries for correction officers that were working through the pandemic, salaries for people who worked in our DD facilities, caring for people with special needs. We also did make a pretty substantial, I think a $300 million transfer of the federal money into our unemployment trust fund to prevent our unemployment trust fund from ending up in a borrowing status from the federal trust fund. So there were a lot of different things, including PPE and other things like that. The new money, I would say there is not a plan right now. Our legislature, the appropriations process concludes no later than May 7th, which happens to be the same day that they're expecting guidance to be released on this new round of federal money. So my anticipation is that there will be a special session of the legislature to essentially appropriate for that money. And there are going to be a lot of, I'm sure, depending on what the guidance says, there's going to be a lot of ideas that come out there. I think the big thing that our state and other states need to be aware of and need to be cautious of is using the money on things that would generate ongoing obligations. So not spending it in a way that would be a repetitive expense that would continue after this money is gone, because you're essentially could be just setting yourself up for really difficult decisions in a couple of years. And I can tell you in Missouri's situation, we're doing quite well from a revenue standpoint. Our budget is in as good a shape as it's ever been in. And so receiving billions of dollars of federal money right now, feels a little weird, because it's, we don't need it really to balance our budget. And so we want to just make sure that whatever we do with this money, it's not going to be like 5 years from now, what do we do with that money? We want to try to do something meaningful with it and something that's going to have a lasting impact without creating a liability for us down the road.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate everybody's time today, and Treasurer, again, want to thank you for being willing to come on here with us and your team. It's always a pleasure to get to talk to you and to work with you in your office. I want to also just say kudos again on the ABLE announcement earlier this week. I think we're in Kansas City, Missouri, where you announced that the Kansas City city government was going to start the ABLE payroll deduction process with your office. So that's really, really cool. And on ABLE, this June is the 5th anniversary of the passage of the Federal ABLE Act. And so we're going to be plugging that and introducing ABLE to a lot of the Smart Women, Smart Money readers. We have over 2 million people that are hitting our digital site in terms of reading articles about financial education. And we have, on occasion, get to spotlight the different state treasurers and state auditors that are on here and the work that you're doing with financial education. So 2 things I would say. One, as Melanie is the managing editor of that magazine, both print and digital, feel free to email her if you have a story idea in terms of something exciting financial education wise that's happening in your state. And then our summer issue that'll come out sometime in July will cover that 5th year ABLE anniversary story. We're going to do a big story. We're going to spotlight some families who have been positively impacted by the passage of ABLE. We also want to make sure and include multiple states who are doing innovative things like Treasurer Fitzpatrick's office with payroll deduction. And we're going to get into the policy a little bit in terms of expansion of age qualification and other things. So please feel free to email us or contact us if you have any questions or ideas on that. My last plug for the summer meeting, again, July 27th through the 30th. If you have ideas on breakout sessions and panel topics, please feel free to email me, Derek@sfof.com. We're taking submissions right now. We're kind of formulating those and thinking through what that looks like. And lastly, if you've had this on your calendar, the fall SFOF meeting was originally scheduled for November 8th through the 11th, which was the second week of November. And we have had the opportunity with the hotel to get our original week that we requested, which is November 2nd through the 5th. So we have called that audible and made the decision to change our national meeting dates for the fall meeting. And so just make sure if you've got that on your calendar, to get that switched to November 2nd through the 5th. We will still be in Orlando at the Omni Champions Gate Resort again, the same place we were this last fall. It was a great meeting. It was a great space. There's going to be discounted tickets to parks and other things that, for before and after, not during the conference, but before and after the conference. So with that, again, I just want to say thank you to everybody for being here. We appreciate your time and hope that you find these to be well spent. And Dee Dee, thank you for putting that link in the chat box. Feel free to email us if you have questions. Thanks again, Treasurer Fitzpatrick, for today and for being here with us.
Hey, absolutely. I appreciate you guys hosting and look forward to seeing you soon.
Okay, great. Have a good day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Treasurer. Thanks, Dirk.
Thanks.